that youth corper must die for committing such offense. That youth corper have to die for committing such offense.
I need a sacrifice.
Father Lord, please don't allow these people to kill me.
The village of Ayetoro lay deep in the heart of Yoruba land, surrounded by tall palm trees and thick forests. From a distance, Ayetoro looked peaceful. Mud houses neatly arranged, children running barefoot, women pounding yam in wooden mortars. But beneath the calm surface lived a fear that ruled every heart in the village. Ayetoro did not fear hunger. Ayetoro did not fear war. Ayetoro feared the masquerade. In this village, the masquerade was not just culture, it was law, power, and punishment. The elders taught that the masquerade was the voice of the gods, the eyes of the ancestors, and the hand that punished disobedience. Every year, during festivals, the masquerades danced through the village square, their tall masks towering like spirits from another world. Drums beat loudly, dust filled the air, and no one dared to question them. But the most dangerous rule in Ayetoro was simple and deadly. No one must go to church. Anyone caught praying to Jesus or attending a church meeting was punished. Some were beaten, some were chased out of the village, others disappeared, never to be spoken of again. The wooden gods, carved figures placed in sacred shrines, were said to protect the village and curse anyone who dared to oppose them. The king of Ayetoro, Oba Adekunle, had ruled for many years. Once he was strong, respected, and feared, but for the past 7 years, a strange sickness had tied him to his palace. His body grew weak, his legs shook, and no herbal medicine worked. Priests performed rituals, sacrificed animals, and consulted oracles, but the sickness remained like a shadow that refused to leave. The villagers whispered, "Maybe the gods are angry." Others said, "Maybe the masquerade demands more sacrifice." Yet nothing changed. Then one Harmattan morning, a young man arrived in Ayetoro with a small bag and a calm face. His name was Daniel Okori, a Nigerian Youth Corps member from Enugu State. He had been posted to Ayetoro to serve his country as a teacher in the village secondary school. Daniel was not tall or muscular. He did not look like a hero, but his eyes carried quiet confidence and his heart carried something stronger than fear: faith. From his first day in the village, Daniel noticed the tension. People spoke in low voices. At night, drums echoed from the forest, and children ran indoors at the sound. When Daniel asked his fellow teachers about church, they quickly warned him. "Oga Kopa, please be careful here," one teacher whispered. "This village no like church people." Daniel was shocked. He had grown up in Enugu, attending church every Sunday. His faith was not noise, it was his way of life. But now he was in a place where mentioning Jesus could cost him his life. On his first Sunday, Daniel knelt alone in his small room. No singing, no loud prayer, just quiet words whispered to God. "Lord, you sent me here for a reason. Give me wisdom, give me courage." At school, Daniel quickly became loved by his students. He taught with patience and kindness. He listened to their problems. He treated them like humans, not numbers. Among them were Sola, Kunle, Tunde, and Bisi, bright students with curious minds and restless hearts. One hot afternoon, rain clouds gathering in the sky, Daniel stayed back after class to help some students revise. Sola, Kunle, Tunde, and Bisi remained behind. As they solved problems on the board, loud drums suddenly echoed from the forest. The students froze. "The masquerade is coming out," Kunle whispered, his voice shaking. Daniel noticed the fear immediately. "Why are you all afraid?" he asked gently. No one answered at first. Then Bisi spoke, tears filling her eyes. "They punish people who disobey the gods. They beat my uncle last year because he prayed with Christians." Daniel's heart grew heavy. These were children, smart, bright, full of life, living under fear every day. He remembered his prayer on the first Sunday he arrived. That evening, Daniel sat alone in his room again. The sound of drums continued deep into the night. He opened his Bible and read quietly about light overcoming darkness. His heart burned, but he knew wisdom was needed. This was not a battle of fists, but of truth. The next day, something unexpected happened. Sola meted for Daniel after school and followed him to his room. He stood at the door, nervous. "Sir, please, I want to talk," Sola said. Daniel invited him. After a long silence, Sola spoke. "Sir, some of us believe in Jesus," he said softly. "Our parents once went to church before the masquerade priest stopped it." Daniel's eyes widened, not in fear, but in hope. "How many of you?" he asked. "Many," Sola replied. "But we are scared. If they find out, they will punish us." That night, Daniel prayed harder than ever. He realized God had already prepared hearts in Ayetoro. The problem was not belief, it was fear. Over the next few weeks, Daniel began to meet quietly with a few students after school. No singing, no noise, just whispered prayers and short Bible stories. They met under trees, behind classrooms, or inside abandoned huts. Every meeting was risky, but their faith grew stronger. The students began to ask questions. "Sir, why are the gods made of wood? Why do they fear Jesus' name? Can God really protect us?" Daniel answered simply, using stories they could understand. He never insulted their culture, but he showed them truth. One day, while walking past the sacred grove, Daniel noticed something important. The wooden gods were kept in open shrines, guarded only by fear. No locks, no chains, just belief. That night, Daniel shared a dangerous idea with the students. "What if fear is the real power?" he asked. "What if these gods are nothing without fear?" The students were silent. Their hearts pounded. This was no longer just prayer. This was action. Kunle swallowed hard. "Sir, are you saying we remove them?" Daniel did not answer immediately. He looked at their young faces and knew the risk, but he also knew that freedom often begins with one bold step. "We will pray," he said finally, "and if God gives peace, we will act." Outside, the drums beat again. Inside, courage was growing. The decision did not come easily. For 3 nights, Daniel and the students prayed in silence, each in their own homes. Fear tried to speak louder than faith. The sound of masquerade drums seemed closer, heavier, as if warning them to stop. But something stronger grew inside their hearts: boldness. On the 4th night, the moon hung low in the sky, half covered by clouds. The village of Ayetoro slept, unaware that history was about to change. Daniel met Sola, Kunle, Tunde, and Bisi behind the school compound. Their hands trembled, but their eyes were firm. None of them carried weapons, only a torchlight, a sack, and prayer in their hearts. "Remember," Daniel whispered, "we are not fighting people, we are standing for truth." They moved quietly through narrow paths, avoiding houses. Every sound made their hearts jump: the cry of a night bird, the snap of a dry branch. When they reached the sacred grove, the air felt heavy. Tall trees surrounded the shrines like guards. The wooden gods stood silently, carved faces staring into the darkness. For a moment, no one moved. Bisi began to cry softly. "What if they kill us?" she whispered. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "God is with us," he said calmly. "Fear will not rule us tonight." They prayed one last time. Then one by one, they lifted the wooden gods from the shrines. Nothing happened. No thunder, no fire, no voice from the sky. The students stared in shock. They are just wood," Tunde said. They tied the gods together, placed them inside the sack, and carried them quickly to the river at the edge of the village. The water flowed dark and steady, reflecting the moonlight. Daniel lifted the sack. "In the name of Jesus," he said softly, "we reject fear." They pushed the sack into the river. It sank slowly, swallowed by the water. For a moment, the world was silent. Then the wind blew. They ran back to their homes, hearts pounding, minds racing. That night, Daniel did not sleep. Neither did the students. Morning came with confusion. The masquerade priests went to the shrines to prepare for rituals and screamed. The wooden gods were gone. The village gathered quickly. Panic spread like fire. "The gods are angry. Who did this? The curse will fall on us." The priests accused strangers immediately. Daniel was the first name on their lips. By afternoon, the masquerade appeared, dancing violently through the village. Drums thundered. Men with whips searched houses. Daniel was dragged from his room in front of everyone. "You brought a strange god here," the head priest shouted. "You have destroyed our protection." The students watched from a distance, tears in their eyes, shaking with fear. They had promised silence, but guilt burned inside them. Daniel was tied to a tree in the village square. The crowd gathered. Some villagers looked angry, others looked scared. A few looked unsure. The whips fell hard on Daniel's back. Blood stained his white NYSC shirt. Pain screamed through his body, but he did not cry out. Instead, he prayed silently. "Father, forgive them." The priest shouted, "Confess! Tell us who helped you." Daniel lifted his head weakly. "I did it alone." But the truth could not hide forever. As the beating continued, a small voice broke through the noise. "It was us too." Everyone turned. Sola stepped forward, then Kunle, then Tunde, then Bisi. Soon, more children stepped out, many of them, sons and daughters of chiefs, priests and elders. The truth had come out. The village square of Ayetoro became silent in a way it had never been before. No drums, no shouting, no masquerade dancing, only the sound of heavy breathing and beating hearts. The children stood there, many of them, young boys and girls with dust on their feet and fear in their eyes, yet courage in their voices. They were the same children the village claimed to protect, the same children the masquerade rituals were meant to guide. Now, they were standing against the very system that ruled their lives. The elders looked at one another in shock. The head priest pointed angrily. "You too?" he shouted. "You followed this stranger?" Sola lifted his head. "We followed truth," he said. "We are tired of fear." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Mothers gasped. Fathers clenched their fists. Some women began to cry. No one expected this. The plan was to punish a stranger, not to face their own children. Daniel hung weakly against the tree, blood dripping slowly. He could barely stand, but when he saw the students, tears filled his eyes, not of pain, but of love and pride. The masquerade priests grew confused. Their power depended on fear and silence, and now both were breaking. The chief elder stepped forward. "What should we do now?" he asked the king's messenger, who had been watching quietly. The messenger cleared his throat. "This matter is too big," he said. "It must be taken to the palace." Daniel and the students were untied and dragged to the king's palace. Villagers followed in large numbers, whispering and arguing among themselves. Some demanded death. Others felt pity. A few, deep in their hearts, felt hope. At the palace, Oba Adekunle sat weakly on his throne, supported by cushions. His face looked older than his years. His hands shook slightly. The sickness had drained his strength and pride. When Daniel was brought before him, the king looked closely at the young man. "Is this the one?" he asked weakly. "The one who challenged our gods?" "Yes, Kabiesi," the priest replied. The king turned his eyes to the children kneeling nearby. And these are the ones who followed him? Yes. For a long moment, the king said nothing. Then he spoke slowly. These children are our future, he said. If they are lost, then the village is already dead. The priest protested loudly, demanding death. The gods must be appeased. The stranger must die. Daniel gathered the little strength he had left and raised his head. Kabiesi, he said gently, give me a chance. The palace fell silent again. A chance for what? The king asked. To prove that Jesus Christ is real, not by fighting, not by insult, but by power and truth. The elders gasped. The priests laughed. The king coughed weakly. You are bold, he said. What proof do you bring? Daniel looked at the king with compassion. You have been sick for years, he said softly. Let my God heal you. Anger erupted. Kill him now, the priest shouted. But the king raised a weak hand. What do you require? He asked Daniel. Let the king fast and pray for 7 days, he said. No sacrifices, no rituals, only fasting. Laughter filled the palace. But the king's eyes showed tiredness. Tired of sickness, tired of fear, tired of empty rituals. If this fails, the king said, you will die. Daniel nodded. I accept. The village held its breath. For the first time in Ayetoro's history, the masquerade was silent and hope had entered the palace. The announcement spread through Ayetoro like wildfire. The king would fast, not to the wooden gods, not to the masquerade, but to test the power of Jesus Christ. Some villagers laughed, others trembled, many were confused. Never in the history of Ayetoro had a king humbled himself this way. Fasting was for priests and desperate men, not for a ruler whose word was law. Daniel was locked in a small room near the palace, his wounds untreated but his spirit alive. The students were sent home under strict watch. The masquerade priests stayed close to the palace, angry and restless, waiting for Daniel to fail. On the first day of fasting, Oba Adekunle refused food and drink. The palace doctors warned him, Kabiesi, your body is weak. You may not survive this. The king raised his hand slowly. I have tried everything else, he replied. Let me try this Jesus. That night, Daniel prayed from his room. His voice was low, but his faith was loud. Lord, this is not about me, he whispered. Let them know you are real. The second day came. The king's body shook with weakness. The priests mocked quietly. Let us see, they said. Let us see this foreign god. By the third day, something strange happened. The king slept peacefully for the first time in years. No pain, no shaking, no nightmares. When he woke up, he noticed his chest felt lighter. He said nothing. By the fourth day, villagers began to whisper. The king looks different. He stood up by himself. His voice sounds stronger. The masquerade priests grew uneasy. They tried to perform rituals secretly, but nothing worked. Fear began to change sides. On the fifth day, the king asked to see Daniel. Daniel was brought out, weak but standing. Kabiesi, Daniel said respectfully. I feel strength returning, the king admitted quietly. What is happening to me? Daniel smiled gently. Jesus heals, he said simply. On the seventh day, the impossible happened. Oba Adekunle stood up in the palace courtyard without help. The crowd gasped. He lifted his hands, steady and strong. The sickness that had ruled him for years was gone. Women screamed with joy. Men fell to their knees. even some priests stepped back in fear. The king's voice rang out clear and loud. "The sickness is gone." Tears filled his eyes as he turned to Daniel. "Your God is real," the king declared, "and this village can no longer live in darkness." The masquerade priests fell silent. A new chapter for Ayetoro had begun. The news of the king's healing spread beyond Ayetoro before the sun set. Villages nearby sent messengers. Traders stopped on the road to ask questions. Everyone wanted to know how a sickness that had lasted for years disappeared in just 7 days. Fear, which once ruled Ayetoro, was losing its grip. Oba Adekunle called for a full village gathering in the open square. This time, there were no masquerades, no drums of intimidation, no priests shouting curses. The air felt different, lighter, freer. Daniel stood beside the king, still healing from his wounds. The students stood behind him, proud but humble. The king raised his staff. "People of Ayetoro," he said, "for years, fear has guided us instead of wisdom." He paused and looked at the masquerade priests. "We punished our own children. We beat a young man who came to serve this land." A deep silence followed. "The gods we trusted could not heal me," the king continued, "but Jesus Christ healed me without sacrifice, without blood." Some villagers began to cry. "I declare today," the king said firmly, "that no one in Ayetoro will be punished for worshipping Jesus." Gasps filled the crowd. "And from this day," he added, "a church will be established in this village." The masquerade priests protested, but their voices were weak now. Their power was broken. Some left the village that same day. Others stayed, watching in confusion as their influence faded. Daniel was invited to speak. He stepped forward slowly. "I did not come here to fight culture. I came to serve, to teach, and to share love." He pointed to the students. "These children are brave. They chose truth over fear." The students smiled shyly. Over the next weeks, the first small church was built, using mud bricks and wood. It was simple, but it was free. On the first Sunday, the building overflowed. Even elders who once supported punishment came quietly and sat at the back. Songs of praise replaced fear-filled drums. The masquerade masks hung silently in storage, no longer feared. Daniel's service year ended, but his work did not. Before leaving Ayetoro, the king honored him publicly. "You came as a stranger," the king said, "but you leave as a son of this land." Daniel smiled, tears in his eyes. Light had won. Months passed and Ayetoro was no longer the village it once had been. The drums of fear had been replaced with songs of joy. Children walked freely, laughing without hiding. Mothers prayed openly. Fathers shared stories of faith, and the once powerful masquerade shrines were now empty, reminders of fear overcome by courage. The church, built by Daniel and the students, became the heart of the village. On Sundays, the sound of hymns echoed through the dusty streets. People came from nearby villages, curious to see the place where a young stranger had brought change. Oba Adekunle, now healthy and strong, often stood at the church doorway, smiling proudly as his people learned that love and faith were stronger than fear and tradition. Daniel had returned to Enugu to continue his life, but his heart remained with Ayetoro. Letters and messages from students and villagers poured in. Stories of children daring to pray, families finding hope, and the elderly embracing faith warmed him. He knew the work he started would continue because it had become bigger than himself. The masquerade priests, once feared as unstoppable, were no longer threats. Some left the village, some stayed quietly, learning to coexist with a new way. The village had learned a powerful lesson. Fear may control for a time, but truth and faith conquer all. One day, the king gathered the villagers in the square, now filled with laughter instead of tension. He addressed them with a voice full of wisdom and gratitude. "My children," Oba Adekunle said, "we have learned that courage and faith are more powerful than fear. We punished our own for speaking truth. We relied on wood and masks instead of God, but now we see the light. We must protect it, nurture it, and pass it to future generations." The children looked up at him, proud and hopeful. Many of them remembered the night they had risked everything to act bravely with Daniel. They understood that real strength was not in whips or masquerades, but in standing for what is right. Daniel's story, though far from finished, left a legacy. Courage can overcome fear. Faith can heal even the impossible. Even the smallest voice can ignite great change. Before leaving, Daniel recorded a message for all who would hear it. Do not be afraid to stand for truth. Do not hide your faith. God sees every heart, and He rewards those who trust Him. Share love, teach courage, and let fear fall behind. Fear may control people, but courage, faith, and truth can transform even the darkest places. Stand firm in your beliefs, protect the innocent, and never underestimate the power of a single determined heart. If this story touched your heart, comment below about your favorite part, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of courage and faith. Let's spread the light together.